This project in our garden has been going on a bit too long, but like so many gardening tasks, what started small has snowballed into something much, much bigger. But I really hope that in the long run, it'll all be worth it. So come with me and I'll explain where we're at. Hello and welcome to Murphy's Garden, and in this video I want to get you up to speed on where we're at with our Rill garden and explain just why it's taking so long. So let me start with a bit of history. We bought this area, which was originally a small paddock, several years after purchasing our house. At the time we couldn't really afford it, but we really didn't want anyone building on it and ruining our view, so we prioritised mustering up the cash. Back then it was full of nettles and weeds, but over time we began mowing and improving it. The kids loved playing out in it, and Murphy would chase his ball all day long if he could. Eventually we decided to develop the space properly, using the house and the view up to it as our guide. We tentatively marked out some of the beds. To this day, I'm absolutely amazed that we managed to do it so accurately, considering we hadn't much of a clue on what we were doing. But the basic layout that we made that day still remains, and it works beautifully. We planted an outer hedge of Lalandi to give structure and shelter, and then we also planted an inner beech hedge to give further protection from the wind, which was a real problem in those early years. And then once the borders were protected, I filled them with perennials and bulbs. And for a few years, it looked absolutely lovely in early summer. But as I've talked about before, over time, the borders just stopped working. So have a look at that video and I'll explain at length why these borders weren't working. I think it's always harder to remove plants that are fine, but just not really right for the design than it ever is to start a garden from scratch. Still, that's exactly what we've been doing, revisiting earlier attempts, armed with perhaps a little bit more experience and hopefully a little bit more patience than we had in the early years, with the hope of achieving something that feels more refined and cohesive. We'd always felt that the stretch of grass between the borders was just crying out for some water, something to draw the eye through the space, so we decided on a rill, whilst we didn't quite realise just how much work that would involve. So let's rewind the clock to when it all began. We first marked out the rill in autumn 2023. At the time we were working nearby and planning to put in some trees. We figured if we wanted to enjoy them in our lifetime, we better get a move on. We weren't getting any younger. That decision then triggered the Rill dig out, and we could spread all that soil over the new tree area. But in doing so, we managed to create chaos and havoc in not just one part of our garden, but in two. Once the hole was dug, work paused for some time while we got on with planting the trees. Then the following autumn, I lifted the plants from the beds. Also, we removed the box hedging, which just had box blight, but also just didn't work with the look that we were after. And we also removed the obelisks from the site. In early summer this year, Al started work again. He redug the hole, which had partially collapsed over time, and using a rotary laser level to make sure everything was precisely aligned, we then began pouring in the MOT crush, and we used a whacker plate to compact the base, walking up and down, checking and checking again the levels. Next came the shuttering, so wooden forms to shape the concrete footings for the blockwork. We put in rebar that was laid for extra strength, and once the concrete was poured and levelled, under of course Murphy's careful supervision, we left it to set for a few days. Then came the concrete blocks. Al laid 4 full courses, and they were laid flat, which added strength but made it more expensive, but it was worth it for the durability that we wanted. And between the courses, he also added some plastic water pipes, which he wrapped in landscape fabric. And this is to allow transfer of moisture between the layers. And if you're laying anything over 3 meters, about 10 feet, it's best to include expansion gaps just to prevent cracking. which we drilled in afterwards. The gap between the blocks and the earth was then filled with pea gravel. That got as far as early summer. Since then, progress seemed to stall a little. Life gets in the way, but during that time we gathered all the materials we needed: the pond liner, pumps, lighting, and the stones for the edges. We even had a go at laying out the stones in a giant puzzle to make sure they'd fit, and I made sure I took a photograph to remind us how to put them back together again, which we'll need later. Originally, we'd planned to keep the grass around the rill, but after a long hot summer, it was clear that it just wasn't working. It looked patchy, it looked uneven, the ground was undulating a little bit in places too. During a visit to RHS Garden Bridgewater over the summer, we realised that self-binding gravel would actually suit this area far better and would be less maintenance in the long term. When I started sketching planting plans, I found I couldn't quite get the depth and balance I wanted, so I decided to widen the borders even further. With the grass gone anyway, I could do that. And that's where we are now. We've hired a mini digger from our farmer friend Brian. We love a digger day. You can get so much done with a mini digger. It really does the work of 10 people. So stay tuned, and the next phase of this project is about to begin, and we can't wait to finally see this part of the garden come to life. So join us as we wait for the digger to arrive. The gates are open, we're ready and waiting. Is this Brian? Yes it is! Here he comes. Here he comes with our little digger. Who knew I would get so excited about the arrival of a digger? Yay! Let the work commence. One mini digger. Yay! And the first job for the digger is this. This is the compost heap. It seems only sensible as we have the digger to turn the compost heap, because as you can see it's getting a little bit out of hand and is somewhat spilling out of its area that it's meant to be in. So this would be backbreaking to do manually. So while we've got the digger, we're going to use it to turn the compost heap. But I'm showing you this just to demonstrate how easy it is to get distracted from the job in hand. This is all the chippings that Alistair did yesterday, and they make lovely compost, but they do need to be turned. So does anyone else have this problem where you're trying to get on with one job, but every other job seems very, very urgent and must be done, and this is one such job? But the digger makes quick work of it, and the advantage is it can really get lots and lots of air into the pile, and you can see the heat, the steam coming off it. It's lovely and hot in the middle. So looks a lot, but in a couple of days this will go right down. We'll let a little bit of moisture on it, a little bit of rain, because it's very, very dry. And then once there's a little bit of rain on it, we'll cover it over with some tarpaulin. And now we're good to go on the job in hand, what we actually got the digger in for. And this is what the area looks like at the start of the day. So the plan is to remove all of the grass and get it down slightly lower for the MOT crush to go in. So all this grass needs to be lifted and levels re-looked at right across. And just in the morning, that side is all done, all cleared. We'll have to take a little bit more off, but certainly that's all the turf lifted, and now Al's just working on the other side. So if you are doing any big projects in the garden, really, really recommend hiring a mini digger. We used to do everything manually, and it's just not sustainable. It's not good for your body in the long run. Any back injuries, things like that. It just, honestly, this can do so much work. So if you've got access, and they're so small that they can generally fit in on an average through an average gate, so it means that you can really crack on with big jobs and get things done. Al's been very busy, and he has lifted all of the turf and he's just getting the levels right, just getting them down so we can put the hardcore in. Then we can put the pavers and the self-binding gravel, and you can see all the turf piled up here. We'll be moving that to the other area in the next few days. So getting on really, really well. But look how big the area looks. I'll just stand back. You can see how huge it looks and how big the borders are going to be. The borders will be in line with that paving slab up the top there. So they're going to be really, really nice, big, generous borders. Really exciting. And that's the end of day one with the digger in this area. And that's where we're at the end of the close of play today. And the next day I'll use the digger just to lift all the turf, and we put it in the barrow. This is a barrow that we bought, an electric one that we bought quite recently. It has been invaluable. It's such a good machine, but Alistair has promised he will do a review of it, and he certainly put it to the test and can do a thorough review when and if he ever has time to do it, but he has said he will do that. He's been very impressed with it so far. So he's using it to lift the turf, and all of this, as I've said in the previous video, all of this is being reused. Nothing will be wasted. We're going to have a great use for all this soil. And with the barrow now full, I'll just transport the soil into the area next door. This is the area where the trees are, and we're going to be playing around with the level, so completely different look in this part of the garden, but that's for another day. We'll come back to this area in another video. So that's where we're at now, and I think you'll agree the site's looking exciting. It looks vast, it looks really, really big. And next we'll be putting in the MOT crush. I think that Alistair knows the course of events, how it's all got to pan out, but the MOT crush has to go in. Then the edges for the borders have to go back in, and the pond liner, the overflow into the pond liner, the electrics have got to go in, the outlet and the inlet for the water. So we don't want the pond overflowing in wet weather, so we've got an outlet, and then we've got an inlet coming in off the roof of what will be the summer house that's going there. So all these things have to be thought through really carefully, and then finally, when all of that is done, it will be time for the really exciting bit, which is the planting. So aiming to get that done in spring. So follow along for that video in the future, but in the meantime, we've got the excitement of using all those spoils, all that soil that we've removed from that site, and even the clods of turf have become really useful. So we've been moving those over to the tree area, which I think, instead of calling it the Arboretum, I think it's going to be called Murphy's Garden, because that's where Murphy has been buried. So that is where his final resting place is. So I think that's going to be Murphy's Garden. We're working with the levels. So instead of having everything level as is next door, it's going to be the opposite. We're going to be having berms and swales, undulations in that to make it more interesting. We moved the trees in the video we did last, and I'm absolutely loving that. It really looks good, and looking out of the bedroom window I can see all of the trees. The area looks so much fuller, even though it's exactly the same number of trees. It looks so much better, so really glad I did that. Have a look at that if you haven't already, and then join me in the next video when we'll be working with the levels in this area too. So lots of exciting things happening. We're doing other jobs alongside all of this as well, so we're a bit mad. We've got too many things on the go, but anyway, it keeps us out of mischief. So join us in the next one. Bye for now.